Did you know about a year ago they took crawling out of the milestones? Well, this is not a good thing. So today, Dr. Kelly and I are going to talk about crawling. I'm Dr. Linda Slack.
I'm Dr. Kelly, and today we're going to be talking about crawling.
Beautiful. So, Dr. Kelly, what is crawling?
So crawling is when your infant brings one arm and then the opposite leg up, and then they do the same thing, but on the other side. So that is what crawling is.
And when does it begin?
Crawling, so varying sources, but on the early side, crawling begins around 7 months, but it can go up to 11 months. But the average baby crawls around 8 to 9. That's stereotypically when most parents start to see their infant becoming efficient and good at crawling.
And how are parents going to know that crawling is beginning? What are they going to see? What is the infant going to do in preparation to crawling to build their muscles and strength to get there?
Yeah. So obviously, the first milestone is tummy time, or one of the first milestones is tummy time. And from that, you're going to start seeing your infant basically bringing their arms out in front of them and dragging themselves forward. That's what we call army crawling. And a lot of the times they are trying to get to an object that's in front of them, but they get extremely frustrated because they're not going forwards. A lot of the times they end up going backwards by accident because they are learning how to move forward and backwards and side to side. So the first thing that you're going to start to notice is that your infant is going to start army crawling with both their hands and pulling their body and dragging their bellies across the floor. And then eventually they're going to gain enough core strength to be able to bring their hips underneath them and have their knees underneath them. So they'll be in tabletop on all fours, and you'll see them rocking back and forth. And this is their bodies getting ready to learn how to get into that cross crawl formation where they bring one arm and opposite leg up, and then do the same thing opposite side. But what they begin to do first is that rocking pattern.
Absolutely. So tummy time, you mentioned tummy time. Tummy time is so important because if an infant doesn't get enough tummy time, that is one reason why they may skip it. They might skip crawling because they need to be in tummy time to build that extensor strength and to be able to get up onto all fours in the first place to start that rocking, as you mentioned. In addition to, another reason why infants may skip crawling is parents who keep them in containers oftentimes or hold them. So this might be the colicky baby that we talked about a few weeks ago, who's screaming 24/7 or most of the day, where then they're inconsolable and the parents are holding them in their arms. They can't place them down because the infant's so upset. So when an infant is like that, inconsolable, but when they're not inconsolable, if we put them into the upright position too long, too soon. So what is too long, too soon? Between the ages of 0 to 3 months, the infant one is only able to really lay flat. And that's there for a reason. We can't rush those milestones. We need to keep them flat and not upright. Because when we put them into upright posture too fast, too soon, it engages what we call the cerebral cortex, right? The higher centers of the brain. And those higher centers aren't ready for that engagement until the infant is ready to stand up and walk. So if we put the child into upright posture from the beginning, it's more than 1 to 2, they should be in upright posture no more than 1 to 2 hours from 0 to 3 months. If they're in it more, they will be the ones likely to skip the crawling phase. So Dr. Kelly, what happens if they skip the crawling phase?
Well, you'll see later on in life that when they become toddlers or even older than that, when they enter school age, that they are the kids that when they start sports, they're not as coordinated. They're tripping a lot. They can't run and kick a ball at the same time. They can't catch things well. They can't read across a page as well. They struggle when harder tasks come down onto their brain because they don't have the proper foundation. As crawling is extremely important. So they don't have that foundation. So when they do have harder tasks, they aren't able to do them as well. Their brain is compensating and they're struggling. They can technically do it and they can read and they can get through those harder tasks, those academic tasks, but it's not as easy for them as it is for their peers. For somebody who is quote unquote the excellent student, every kid has the ability to be excellent. But when they skip crawling or they don't achieve their milestones in the proper order, then they can struggle, which is hard to hear and hard to see, because we know that it's totally a viable thing that they can achieve these things, and that their bodies are meant to achieve these things. But for the child, they're struggling and they don't know why, and neither does the parent.
Exactly. And the brain is amazing because they are able to compensate. And so that's why we see a lot of parents who say they never did crawl. And they never crawled and they're fine. Yes, because their brain was able to compensate, and maybe they didn't have any other milestones missed, so they were able to get by. But their brain still is working harder to accomplish the same tasks as someone who grew up went through their milestones correctly and the proper trajectory for brain development. So let's talk about some ways that parents may think are very cute, but they're not normal.
So true. So one of the ones that a lot of parents start to see is scooting on the bum. They start to see their kid, they're like, oh, I'm so happy Johnny's moving around, he's getting around the house, he's getting to his toys, but he's scooting on his bum. It's adorable, but that's not a proper way to crawl, because they're not engaging going from left to right hemisphere, which is what that cross crawl pattern does. Similarly, the crab crawl, they are walking or they're crawling and their leg is kicking out, and they're not, that's also not right, because they're both of their arms and legs need to be doing the cross crawl pattern. Or bear crawl, when you see your infant is on, they're upright on their hands, but then they're not on their knees, they're on their tippy toes, so their butt is higher than their shoulders are. And that's also not a proper way to crawl, because they still need to do that cross crawl pattern in order to engage the proper to be able to cross from right to left hemispheres in order to do that well.
So when an infant's not crawling properly, that's really should be a red flag. It's not a sign of cuteness for the parent. So when we see those red flags, what can we do about it as parents?
I mean, the first thing that we always promote, that everybody promotes, and similar to the video that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, tummy time. Tummy time. We can't express it enough. Tummy time is so important. Just like Dr. Linda said, it helps lay the proper foundation to gain strength, but also to be able to learn those activities and gain perception. But it helps them gain core strength so they can bring their hips underneath them. It helps them gain arm strength so they can be able to push themselves up into tabletop. Tummy time is so important, other than just gaining that strength and that ability, but it lays the foundation for crawling to happen. And then having constant free play. The more movement and the more activity and the more places that the infant can go, the better that their brain is learning and adapting. So they'll be able to get into crawling, because they have all of this space and their body can move in all different ways.
Less time in containers. So like containers are great and okay. Like if a parent needs to go to the bathroom and make sure that the infant's safe when they're in that movement phase, or to take a shower or do something of that nature where they have to leave the room for a few minutes. But otherwise, the infant should be in free movement, have the ability to move freely. And then what many people don't know about is the how chiropractors fit in, and pediatric chiropractic. Many more people are bringing their babies to chiropractors. And in the instance of, if we see any of those red flags, baby not crawling right or not crawling at all, like pulling up to stand and walk. And oftentimes parents will think that that's a great thing too. Like, oh, Johnny didn't need to crawl. He just pulled himself right up to standing and walking. So the chiropractors are masters of the central nervous system, and the nervous system controls and coordinates every function in the body. So when we have interference with the connection of the brain to the body, or the body to the brain, that can cause us to crawl abnormally or not function properly as well. So we want to make sure, number one, that the nervous system is working properly. The other thing is that if we miss tummy time, or some people think that that we took crawling out of the milestones because of the back to sleep movement, right? We're putting infants to sleep on their backs to prevent essentially potentially SIDS. That's the main reason for back to sleep movement. And when I had my children, they slept on their tummies. So they got tummy time naturally. Now infants aren't getting enough tummy time and they're sleeping on their backs. So they're not even getting it naturally until maybe they start to roll and choose to sleep on their tummies. But if they don't do that, then they will skip the crawling phase. And this is one of the reasons why we think they took crawling out of the milestone chart.
When it should really be in the milestone chart.
And so important. I think it's one of the most important things. It allows the brain also later on, like when we cross crawl, do that cross crawling, and we will do that when we walk as well. But that allows new connections to be made in the brain between the left and right side of the brain forever. So movement is critical throughout our lives, and movement properly.
Exactly. It's super important. I'm glad you made that point.
Yeah. So I think we covered everything regarding crawling. If anyone has any questions, concerns, you can look us up on our website, drslack.com, and we'll post some information below as well. And until next time, we don't know what we're talking about next week, but we'll be back on. So tune in next time to find out what our next important topic is.